gardens, levied no tax upon hourly visits. But the Mrs. Wentworth received an impression that Eugenia was no friend to the primitive custom of "dropping in." She evidently had no idea of living without a doorkeeper. "One goes into your house as into an inn, except that there are no servants rushing forward," she said to Charlotte. And she added that that was very charming. Gertrude explained to her sister that she meant just the reverse. She didn't like it at all. Charlotte inquired why she should tell an untruth, and Gertrude answered that there was probably some very good reason for it, which they should discover when they knew her better. "There can surely be no good reason for telling an untruth," said Charlotte. "I hope she does not think so." They had of course desired from the first to do everything in the way of helping her to arrange herself. It had seemed to Charlotte that there would be a great many things to talk about, but the Baroness was apparently inclined to talk about nothing. "Write her a note, asking her leave to come and see her. I think that is what she will like," said Gertrude. "Why should I give her the trouble of answering me?" Charlotte asked. "She will have to write a note and send it over." "I don't think she will take any trouble," said Gertrude profoundly. "What then will she do?" "That is what I am curious to see," said Gertrude, leaving her sister with an impression that her curiosity was morbid. They went to see the Baroness without preliminary correspondence, and in the little salon which she had already created, with its becoming light and its festoons, they found Robert Acton. Eugenia was intensely gracious, but she accused them of neglecting her cruelly. "You see, Mr. Acton has had to take pity upon me," she said. "My brother goes off sketching for hours. I can never depend upon him. So I was to send Mr. Acton to beg you to come and give me the benefit of your wisdom." Gertrude looked at her sister. She wanted to say, "That is what she would have done." Charlotte said that they hoped the Baroness would always come and dine with them. It would give them so much pleasure, and in that case she would spare herself the trouble of having a cook. "Ah, but I must have a cook!" cried the Baroness. "An old negress in a yellow turban. I have my heart set upon that. I want to look out of my window and see her sitting there on the grass, against the background of those crooked, dusky little apple trees, pulling the husks off a lapful of Indian corn. That will be local color, you know. There isn't much of it here. You don't mind my saying that, do you? So one must make the most of what one can get. I shall be most happy to dine with you whenever you will let me, but I want to be able to ask you sometimes. And I want to be able to ask Mr. Acton," added the Baroness. "You must come and ask me at home," said Acton. "You must come and see me. You must dine with me first. I want to show you my place. I want to introduce you to my mother." He called again upon Madame Münster 2 days later. He was constantly at the other house. He used to walk across the fields from his own place, and he appeared to have fewer scruples than his cousins with regard to dropping in. On this occasion he found that Mr. Brand had come to pay his respects to the charming stranger. But after Acton's arrival the young theologian said nothing. He sat in his chair with his 2 hands clasped, fixing upon his hostess a grave, fascinated stare. The Baroness talked to Robert Acton, but as she talked, she turned and smiled at Mr. Brand, who never took his eyes off her. The 2 men walked away together. They were going to Mr. Wentworth's. Mr. Brand still said nothing. But after they had passed into Mr. Wentworth's garden, he stopped and looked back for some time at the little white house. Then, looking at his companion, with his head bent a little to one side, and his eyes somewhat contracted, "Now I suppose that's what is called conversation," he said. "Real conversation." "It's what I call a very clever woman," said Acton, laughing. "It is most interesting," Mr. Brand continued. "I only wish she would speak French. It would seem more in keeping. It must be quite the style that we have heard about, that we have read about. The style of conversation of Madame de Staël, of Madame Récamier." Acton also looked at Madame Münster's residence among its hollyhocks and apple trees. "What I should like to know," he said, smiling, is just what has brought Madame Récamier to live in that place. Chapter 5